Now that's an important statement.
Yes.
That you can be a theologian. You can have the head knowledge of the Bible and even of God. But unless it's backed up, buttressed, undergirded by a heart knowledge, you're still working through your own strength. And what it occurs to me, Margaret, is that sooner or later, the wheels are going to come off. It's going to break down if you're trying to do it from yourself.
Well,
because we're carnal, the Bible is spiritual. How can carnal keep spiritual? It's not going to work.
yeah, and the children see it.
Yes, yes.
The children see it much better than the parents. I mean, we had struggles in our home. My husband grew up in a home where he didn't have to care about anyone else. He grew up self-centered. I grew up always caring for all the little brothers and sisters. And I loved to do it, and so that was my temperament, my way. And I realized he would put himself first instead of the children. And especially our son, who had trouble going through school, he had dyslexia. And I felt that my husband wasn't caring enough for him. And so, yeah, we had arguments over it. And when I had resentment toward him, he was to blame, wasn't he? You know, this is what we do. Well, we came home from the mission field. We were 10 years over there. We came home from the mission field. I went to visit my parents, whom I hadn't seen for a good number of years. And my father was 78. He had a heart problem. He could drop dead any time, and he knew it. And so here he was at the end of his life. You know, we sort of have the idea sanctification is the work of a lifetime.
Sure.
By and by, I will overcome, right? And we misunderstand what sanctification is. And so here was my father, and some of his children had already started studying the subject of righteousness by faith. And he was listening to what they were talking about, and he came to me. I was his favorite daughter, his most obedient, and I was a minister's wife, and so he expected me to have answers. And so he said, "Margaret, have I missed something?" I said, "Father, I don't know." "Well, what is righteousness by faith?" I said, "I don't know." "Well, listen to what some of your brothers and sisters are talking about and tell me if they're right." So I listened all Sabbath afternoon, and every once in a while Father would turn to me and he would say, "Are they right?" "I don't know." And by the end of the day, my father was getting very concerned because he was beginning to realize something is missing.
Yes, yes.
And I was beginning to realize something was missing in my life. These brothers and sisters had been led into deep repentance. I could tell the difference. There was something about them that was very special. And I wanted to know what it was. But in the evening, we were all in the living room, and one of my sisters said, "Let's kneel in a family circle, and let's make sure there's nothing between any of us. Make sure everything is right between us and God."
Yes.
So there we were kneeling in this circle, and I was in the circle. One of my sisters was right next to Father, and she looked up at him, hoping he would confess how deeply he had wronged her. He couldn't do it. She didn't say a word, but he couldn't do it. He knew what she wanted, and he just jumped up and ran outside.
Oh, my soul.
And I jumped up and ran after him to protect him from himself. Because I remembered as a child, if Father had to take the blame for anything, he would threaten to kill himself. He could not take the blame. And so I went after him. It was dark outside. I went up to him. I put my arms around his neck. He was no taller than I. And I held him tight. And then I prayed, Lord, what do I tell my father? And the Lord gave me strong words. I said, Dad, the reason you get so disturbed and so nervous when all of us children come home for a visit is because you are so afraid we are going to talk about our childhood. I said, you have so deeply wronged your children. The only one you have not wronged is me.
Yeah, and I suspect we'll take you to be the one to say that.
Yes. He thought for a moment, and he said, Margaret, I have wronged you too. What was he doing? For the first time, acknowledging his guilt. You see, how can God forgive us? How can God give us a new heart? How can he do anything to save us until we acknowledge our guilt? Until we take the blame of our sin.
Yeah. If we confess our sins,
yeah,
he is faithful and just to forgive.
But if we put all of our heart sins on other people, what can God do? He stands knocking at the door year after year, wanting to come into the heart, and he can't because we don't open the heart and acknowledge our failures.
I think that is so hard for so many people to do, to say, Lord, I have sinned, and yet that is crucial to your restoration.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, then my father took me into the house in a private room, and the guilt just poured out. The guilt of his youth, the guilt of his fatherhood. He said, Margaret, the guilt is just crushing me. Margaret, help me.
And that was your father's words to you?
Yes.
Yes.
And I had no answer. I didn't know how to help a sinner. I could have told him, try a little harder, Dad. But in that moment, I knew that was not the answer.
Yes. Now, what's interesting is this healing of him is also a revelation for you, because, as you said, you came home and married to a pastor, 10 years of missionary service, so you're doing all the right things, but still not in right relationship with God.
Not
Obedience knowing. Because that's what you were taught to do, as opposed to having an abiding relationship with Jesus Christ. Yeah.
So I had to leave him in that condition, and I went home. But I determined I was going to find answers for him.
Yes.
I didn't yet know I was in a lost condition.